Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. Speaker.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
First line of questioning will be to the Auditor General team. Anyone can answer it. But a couple of weeks ago, mid-March, we heard from both Darren Anthony and Christian Firth, the two principal owners of GC Strategies, also known as Government of Canada Strategies, who picked apart the findings in the Auditor General's report. Specifically, Mr. Firth said his reputation had been damaged by false information and what he called an inaccurate report by the AG. Quoted, "Virtually everything reported about my company in the media and stated about me and my company has been false." He said his company was paid $11 million for the ArriveCan, disputing the Auditor General's findings that GC Strategies received almost double that, $19 million. He blamed the discrepancy on flaws in the government's financial systems. We then heard from his partner Darren Anthony and surprisingly simply parroted everything that his partner had said, didn't even take the time to actually read your report, didn't take the time to read the report of the procurement ombudsman, but had no problem stating that everything was categorically false. Specifically, he said the Auditor General's findings were inaccurate. He says that the report from both AG and procurement ombudsman, which found both serious problems with ArriveCan contracts, were wrong, and admitted again that he had not read the report. So I'm sure this is not the first time the AG team has learned about these particular statements. I'd like an opportunity for you to respond on how you feel about these particular statements.
Thank you for the question. I'll start with the findings. We're confident with the findings that we provided to Parliament in our reports. We have a rigorous audit process to make sure that the facts and information that we provide is accurate. With respect to the estimates, we did provide an estimate in the report around the overall cost, and we identified an amount per contractor. There are some facts that absolutely cannot be disputed. In particular, it is a fact that the contractors were paid the amounts that we listed in our report. I should say that they received at least those amounts. Some contractors received more. What is really at issue is whether or not those amounts should be attributed to the ArriveCan app versus work on another IT project. And this is where the poor record keeping problems by CBSA raise this confusion and leave these open questions. Ultimately, in our report, we mentioned that the poor record keeping led us to have to build up an estimate. We used the CBSA's financial systems, the contracting documents, and other evidence to build up this estimate. It is important to remember that our estimate includes more than what was spent on building the app. It also includes amounts for the implementation, maintenance, and other associated costs. And this is because Parliament asked us to look at all aspects of the ArriveCan app. The shortcomings in the documentation and the weak controls made it very difficult to precisely attribute costs amongst these elements of ArriveCan. But ultimately, any number that is provided, whether it's CBSA's or ours, is an estimate because of the poor record keeping. I'll stop there.
Okay, so let me understand that correctly. The 19 million, the approximate 19 million you attribute to GC Strategies. Are you saying that there is room to interpret that as being a combination of ArriveCan contracting and possibly other elements of contracting with the CBSA?
Yes, in our report, we did state that it is possible that some amounts attributed to ArriveCan were not for the application. And indeed, when CBSA provided information to the Government Operations Committee, there were some amounts in the records that they produced there that we didn't consider to be for ArriveCan, and there were amounts that we have considered to be for ArriveCan that CBSA disagrees with. Ultimately, though, we were confident enough with our estimate to put it in a report to Parliament.
Were you confident enough to say that that estimate could have been actually higher than 19 million?
It could have been higher and it could have been lower. I can't
Okay.
be precise. I mean, it is an estimate after all.
Okay. Notwithstanding the comments of both Firth and Anthony at committee several weeks after the release of the AG report, did you hear directly from Firth or Anthony prior to their testimony?
Prior to their testimony, we received a letter from them before we tabled our report.
Did they supply you with any additional documentation to verify their numbers, which were actually closer to 11 million?
Like I said, we received the letter. We built our estimate on the basis of the documentation and the financial system at CBSA, amongst other evidence.
But did they offer to supply you documentation in their possession which established the 11 million figure according to their records?
In their letter, they did offer to provide us information if we required it. However, I would say that, like I said, our estimate was based on not just what semantically some contractors are suggesting was the build for ArriveCan. It was for the entire picture of ArriveCan.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. That is your time. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Vleeming, on GC Strategies' now deleted website, they had a number of testimonials from senior government officials. In one case, the Government of Canada Chief Information Officer was quoted as saying, quote, GC Strategies understands our needs on a business and technical level, end quote. Who would have said that?
Thank you for the question. I've only been at the CBSA for 11 months, so I was not CIO at the time. Prior to me, Min Doan was CIO over the last, I think, 5 years.
Has anyone asked Mr. Doan if that was him?
I am not aware of that.
Who else could it have been? So we've established it wasn't you.
If the reference was specifically to who was the Chief Information Officer of the CBSA in the last 5 years, that would have been Min Doan.
Okay, but it wasn't you that said it.
That's correct.
Are you aware that it was said?
I am
Or
not aware
alleged
that
to
it was
have been said? You're not familiar?
All I've heard is the testimony of committees that referencing that certain testimonials on the GC Strategies website.
And did it cause you concern that endorsement had been offered by
It
the CIO?
surprised me, as you wouldn't typically see that, at least in my experience.
In another example, the chief data officer for the public sector said, quote, GC Strategies, see the bigger picture and do not chase the quick sale. Who would have said that?
I'm not actually aware of who the chief data officer was at the time, sorry.
Has anyone tried to find out who said it?
I'm not part of the internal investigation, which I would assume is also going to be looking at that.
In another case, a Government of Canada senior executive said, quote, GC Strategies listen and try to find solutions to my problems versus selling me a solution to a problem I've never had. Who would have said that?
Not aware of that either.
So we don't know. Could it have been Min Doan?
It's impossible for me to answer that, as there's no details on who actually said that and what their position was.
I'm a bit surprised that even a basic level of curiosity wouldn't have encouraged you to find out if your predecessor, on an unnamed basis, but only using the title that you now have, had actually said something like that, and then now occupying that position would not have sought remediation, that is, for it to be taken down. Did you ask for it to be taken down by GC Strategies?
No, as far as I'm aware, it's certainly not against any rules or laws to put that up there, and I'm not sure the government has the ability to
But you could ask
private
if it's not
industry.
true. But
Again, if it's not against the law, I'm not aware of them violating any rules by putting that up there. It's just not something I would typically expect.
so it's compliant with the values and ethics codes for the public service.
As far as I'm aware, that would be compliant with the Values and Ethics Code.
Well, I can tell you if someone who previously held my position said something that I fundamentally disagreed with, and it was attributed in current time by job title only, I'd at least ask the person who had it posted, because I value my reputation and think it's important to the integrity of the institution that I represent that things that are demonstrably false don't continue to stand. I would hope that people who represent in senior positions the Government of Canada on behalf of all Canadians would exercise that same basic due diligence, because we have let's be clear, this is a two-person shady company operating out of a basement that get paid tens of millions of dollars, and they're close enough. They're now alleging that they're close enough with the Liberal government senior officials that they're able to provide testimonials. I'm surprised that you'd be unaware that there hasn't been an investigation of that. Have you, sir, or the current CBSA executives had any contact with Christian Firth or Darren Anthony?
I have not met either of those.
Have you had contact with them?
No, never.
No phone calls, emails, text messages?
Nothing at all.
Okay. Mr. Moore, same question.
No, I've had no contact. No, I've had no contact at all with GC Strategies or any of their employees.
Do you know when the last contact with the person that previously occupied your position, Mr. Fleming, when Mindone would have last contacted them?
I'm not aware of that specific date, no.
Mr. Moore, are you aware of their last contact with the agency?
No, but I know that we ceased paying them in June of 2023.
In June of 2023.
That's right.
Right. Nearly a year after concerns had been brought to the attention of CBSA
Quick question, Mr.
through
Barrett.
the work of Conservatives at standing committees of Parliament. I have more questions for Lee.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. Just want to make sure you got it in under the wire. To Mr. Nader, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, thank you to our witnesses for joining us here this morning. At a recent public accounts meeting, Danny Richard, president of the Canadian Financial Officers, testified that between the three departments in question here, there are over 1,000 members in those departments, including 5 members who flagged issues with management. But we understand that very few, perhaps a dozen of these financial officers were actually involved in this procurement process. Mr. Moore, are you concerned by this?
So I'm concerned by a number of the points Mr. Richard made, and I do regularly communicate with him. And I want to identify what more we can do to actually improve the financial manager organisation within the within CBSA. But, you know, sort of where we are in terms of the delegation of financial instruments is the majority of the controls are at the manager level, and we then have financial manager advisors who are engaged in the strategic financial management. They do not sign task authorizations. They do not sign invoices and Section 32 and Section 34 responsibilities. But if they identified wrongdoing or any issues associated with that, they would be responsible for bringing them forward to us.
Well, thankfully, there were problems identified and nothing happened, and I think that's on you, sir. I want to move on, though, but we know there are a number of current investigations ongoing in a number of venues, but most concerning is obviously the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, the Mounties. Our concern here is that Mindone's emails have magically disappeared. The Chief Technology Officer couldn't save his emails, which is rather concerning, rather than perplexing, and I'm sure the RCMP are very intrigued and interested by that. I want to know from you, Mr. Moore, what are you doing to recover those emails?
So that is subject to an internal investigation and potentially also an RCMP investigation. I'm not privy to either of those investigations, so I can't comment on where they are. In terms of what we are doing to recover those emails, maybe I'll ask Mr. Fleming to explain.
Thank you. So this is actually being run by our internal investigation as well, including the recovery side of things to ensure there's no conflict of interest. And so I'm not aware of any more information, not privy to that internal investigation.
To you, Mr. Fleming, how easy is it to permanently delete all your emails without a trace?
It is actually surprisingly easy. The reality is that Shared Services Canada is accountable for email and the policies around that, and a person can choose to delete their emails. It is retained for 30 days where they can't permanently, and after that it is deleted.
Surprisingly easy. I am, quite frankly, shocked by the fact that the Government of Canada, with all the resources of the state behind it, cannot preserve the emails of someone in a position like Mindone when there is a criminal investigation ongoing and these documents simply disappeared. I think that's incredibly concerning. I want to move on. Mr. Hayes, to you, in your opening comment, you echoed many of the concerns that were previously raised by yourself and by the Auditor General about lack of records, not having paper trails, just things not existing. We received a letter recently from the Department of Public Services and Procurement Canada, the supposed experts on procurement. And the Assistant Deputy Minister wrote this. On February 2nd, 2017, PSPC awarded a contract to GC Strategies for $24,977 through a supply arrangement for professional services to provide business and technical learning to PSPC employees using a new client relationship management system. A search of PSPC systems found references to the contract, including the total amount. However, the contract document itself was misplaced during a reorganization and relocation of hard copy files. So the department supposed to be the experts on procurement is losing documents on procurement and on contracts. What's more, Treasury Board Secretariat, a central agency, wrote to us and said, on behalf of the Treasury Board Secretariat, we have a nil response to expanded motion is provided, nil response to GC Strategies, yet in the Public Accounts of Canada, it lists GC Strategies as having received an account or the contract for the Treasury Board Secretariat. So here we have two key agencies, neither of which can account for their own contracts with GC Strategies. Is that a concern from the Auditor General's office?
We would expect that proper books and records are kept on contracts and on payments made under those contracts for the full period of the retention periods required by law. So obviously there are times where hard copies might be misplaced, and it's important to find them. We've constantly made recommendations and findings about the importance of good record management and accurate data collection. So yes, I would express concern over the fact that contract documents can't be located.
Thank you very much. That's your time, Mr. Nader.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Moore, presumably your department has emergency planning in place. Would that be the case?
Yes, so we have a standing emergency plan which was utilised during the pandemic. As I've said earlier, we established 3 separate governance committees. We decided to split the operational crisis management committees into 2: the internal task force, which I chaired, and the border task force, which was chaired by the vice president of the Travellers Branch. They both reported to the Emergency Management Committee, which was the executive committee. In the early days, that committee met daily throughout, 24/7 essentially. Over time, that frequency of those meetings started to go down slightly. But it was definitely operating in an emergency management approach across the entire country, because also all of the individual regions were having to manage with a vast change in their approach to how they operated the border. A lot of the ports of entry, certainly the ones which were commercial, were operating incredibly hard, whereas some of the traveller ones actually saw a very big reduction in the volume because of the volumes.
Was this the first time you've experienced
just one
in
second,
your role?
Mr. Viersen, I have a point of order. Yes, Ms. Yep.
I just would like the chair to remind those in the room not to take photos.
Oh,
Thank you.
I did not catch that. You are absolutely correct. There should be no photos. I'm going to have the clerk check with you, Ms. Yip, as to who you spotted, and I will instruct the clerk to have them delete the photo or photos. If you would just check that, I'll keep running the meeting. Thank you, Ms. Yip. Turning now back to Mr. Viersen, you have 3.5 minutes to go, please. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Moore, in your time as in your position, is this the first time your department used this emergency planning procedure?
It uses it on sadly on 2 regular basis. So, for example, I think a few months ago where there was the tragic accident in the United States around Rainbow Bridge, the Southern Ontario region had to bring in their emergency planning for that, especially during the period when it could have been considered to be a terrorist attack. So any operational activity at the border, we will bring in our emergency management procedures.
Okay, so this is not the first time that this has happened. It seems unique then that there would be a general COVID fund. Was that unique?
So it was unique, but it was also a product of what we were having to do. So, for example, we had to increase the cleaning of our ports of entry and to do it twice a day rather than once a day. We had to secure, with the help of the Public Health Agency and PSPC, all of the PPE. We had to buy sanitisation cabinets to allow the officers to actually steam, clean their tools and things like that. So lots of different things.
It was a very broad fund.
It was a very broad fund covering a number of different activities.
Okay, so you would say like a COVID slush fund.
It was definitely not a COVID slush fund. It was an emergency management fund. And in the first year, we provided $5 million to the Information Science and Technology branch to partially cover their costs of the first year of the Arrive Can-App.
From soup to nuts, you could put that in that fund, or it was basically an expense account.
Well, it was an emergency management committee decision. So all decisions went to the emergency management committee, who decided what they were going to be funding with that money.
Okay. What kind of oversight did the minister have of that particular fund?
So the minister had no oversight on that because we were taking this money from our operational funding. So when the minister has oversight when the mains estimates are agreed or when supplementary estimates are agreed, but that would be the only time the minister would have oversight.
Would he have known about this COVID slush fund?
He certainly would not. He probably would not have known about the emergency management fund, but I can't comment on whether the president at that time referred to it.
So from protective gloves, masks, cleaning equipment to IT sourcing, that would have all gone through the same funding.
Yes, and in the first year it was about $20 million in total.
And so you can see how the Auditor General would have had a challenge in dissecting this particular slush fund.
Well, I think I do, and I said at the start, we did not have a separate code for all the different activities. It did all go into this fund, and we learned that lesson. That was a mistake. We should have set up separate codes at the start, but I'm afraid that is part of a problem of being able to identify exactly where the funding went to.
Hence, the conclusion that this was a slush fund rather than an emergency management fund. Mr. Chair, I think that's my time. Thank you very much.
That is, Mr. Bierson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Moore, I am so grateful you're actually part of a panel with the Auditor General. In fact, you're sitting right next to Mr. Hayes, the Deputy Attorney General, Auditor General, I should say. Now, last week, about a week ago, exactly a week ago, I asked you a question. You couldn't answer the question. I wanted to know why you deliberately, your agency, the CBSA, not you personally, why the CBSA deliberately misled and lied to the Auditor General when saying that GC Strategies actually provided a proposal for the initial contract to work with the CBSA. That's what the CBSA confirmed to the Auditor General. The Auditor General confirmed that, in fact, that was false. So here's your opportunity to come clean to Canadians and to members of this committee. You, as a representative of the CBSA, why did you mislead the Auditor General? So as a representative of the CBSA, I do not believe the CBSA did mislead the Auditor General. There were different choices at that time, and one of the choices was to have an in-house developed project using staff augmentation, which is the GC Strategies. I'll stop you right there. Are you suggesting the Auditor General simply got it wrong? They looked for a proposal on the initial contract with CBSA that you said you had in your possession from GC Strategies, and they confirmed it wasn't there.
Well, I think what you're referring to is missing documentation, which I think has been subject to a number of different inquiries. Lots of different people have been looking for the documentation, and that is also part of the investigation to see whether the documentation is missing because of COVID or because of some
Okay,
other reason.
GC Strategy, specifically Mr. Firth, when he attended a few weeks ago, refused to answer questions regarding his involvement in the $25 million IT service contract, stating that responding to that question would somehow jeopardize the RCMP investigation. So we know through the Auditor General's report that I'm sure that you have read that GC, Government of Canada Strategies, was directly involved in the drafting the narrow terms of that $25 million
Chair.
IT service contract.
Point of
Just
order,
one
Chair.
second, Mr. Brock. Yes, Ms. Shanahan?
Yeah, it's just on this government of Canada that Mr. Brock is referring to. Is this an official name? I'm just
That's
I'm just
not
confused.
a
It's
point.
GC Strategies.
Ms. Shanahan, that's
as I-
not a point of order. If the witness is seeking clarity, they're entitled to ask, but not members. Mr. Brock, I don't know if you want to ask your question again. I'll give you
will.
time if you do. So
That's fine.
please do.
For Ms. Shanahan's benefit, it was actually Mr. Firth himself who confirmed that the GC stands for Government of Canada. Not my words. Your witness, Ms. Shanahan, Mr. Firth. So, Mr. Firth, through GC Strategies, created their own terms, drafted their own contract, which surprisingly they actually won. 25 million tax dollars. Canadian taxpayer dollars. Who at CBSA allowed that to happen?
Well, I think, as I've said previously, it is unacceptable for a
No, sir.
contractor.
I know it's unacceptable. Everyone knows it's unacceptable. You're the one responsible. You're accountable for this mess. You're accountable for failures. Now provide us some answers. Who at the CBSA, I want names and I want positions, allowed Government of Canada Strategies to draft their own contract worth 25 million taxpayer dollars? Name, sir.
Well, that is, as I've said before, it's the Board of Technologies and Innovation Directorate which were responsible for that.
Give me a name. Not a department, give me a name.
Well, the DG is Mr. MacDonald, and the Executive Director was Mr. Utano. They were responsible for drafting that statement of
Are you
work.
saying it was Mr. MacDonald and Mr. Utano who allowed GC Strategies to write their own contract? Is that your evidence?
I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that's what
I
was
want. That's the
investigated.
question I'm putting to you, sir. How more
Point of
simpler can I
order, Mr.
phrase it?
Chair.
Who at
Point of order, Mr.
CBSA
Chair.
One
allowed
second,
Uh,
this
Mr.
to
Brock.
happen?
I've taught Miss Khalid. What is your point of order?
With the years of experience we've had, we treat our witnesses with a little bit more respect than what Mr. Brock
That's
is
not a
treating
point of
our
order.
witnesses
Ms.
as
Khalid,
right now.
that is not a point of order. Mr. Brock is trying to get an answer and is becoming, I think, rightly frustrated the way a lot of Canadians are. Mr. Brock, you have the floor again.
Mr. Moore, let's not play games. The question is simple. Who, give me a name, at CBSA allowed Government of Canada Strategies to write their own contract, which they won, $25 million. Give me names, please.
Well, I think as I've already given you names, but that
And I asked you, you gave me names, you gave me Mr. MacDonald and Mr. Utano. I asked you, are they responsible for allowing GC to write the contract? You said no. So the question now is, sir, who at CBSA allowed it?
I said I do not know because it is under investigation, and that is a key part of the investigation internally.
How
but
could
also
you
the
not
RCMP.
Point
know?
of order
How could you
again,
not
Mr.
know,
Chair.
sir?
Just one second, Mr. Brock. Yes, Miss Khalid.
This is a point of order on decorum. The witness has said time and time again he does not know there is ongoing investigations. Why are we badgering a witness?
Again, that is not a
Please,
point of
Chair.
order, Chair.
That is absolutely
That
a
is
point of
not a
order,
point
Chair.
I
This
thought-
is about decorum.
Miss Khalid, Mr. Brock's question was simple. Why don't you know? That's what that was his question. It seems to be a valid question. You might not like how it's posed.
I'm so sorry, Chair. I didn't know you became an agent for the Conservatives
Wow.
there, but
He's a Conservative
I'm asking you,
MP,
to
but-
be fair, he's also the chair of this committee,
Oh,
which
gosh.
begs of him to be nonpartisan in his deliberations in
doesn't.
how we
No, it
operate as a
doesn't.
committee. Yes, it does.
Yes, Ms. Khalid,
Yes, it
and I'll
does.
point out I've had my share of Conservative MPs who have whinged at some of the decisions I've made as well. So
And
when I get it from
Chair,
both
I
sides,
am
I find
quite
myself
tired of
right in the
this
position I need to be. Miss
unparliamentary
Khalid, Mr. Brock has the floor. His question was, why don't you know? That question is in order. Mr. Brock, you have about 40 seconds left.
So you can ask
Mr.
for 6 minutes the same question.
Okay, hold on. Miss Khalid, the more you talk, the more time I'm going to start. The more you talk, the more time Mr. Brock has because you're running into his time to get questions going back and forth. So, Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 40 seconds.
Thank you, Chair. And I won't be silenced by Ms. Khalid or Ms. Shanahan or anyone on that Liberal bench, because these are relevant questions that Canadians want to know an answer to. So I'll ask it again for the 5th time, sir. Why do you not know who in particular allowed GC to write the terms of their own contract, given your position at the CBSA? And the question can go to Mr. Vleming as well. Why do you not know?
So actually, Mr. Hayes has helped me with the chronology in that Mr. MacDonald actually left the CBSA on the 23rd of April 2021, and the first competitive contract awarded to GC Strategies was on the 16th of May 2022. It is still subject to review of the independent of the investigations. Once that has
the investigation run by Mr. Lafleur.
Mr. Brock, your time is up. I'm afraid I will come back to your bench.
So, Mr. Moore, it's going to be incredible, if not impossible, for Canadians to believe that CBSA has no idea who authorized GC Strategies to ink the requirements for a $25 million contract and then get awarded that same contract, and nobody knows. Nobody knows, and you offered some names. Then, when pressed by Mr. Brock on if those names were those responsible, you said, "Well, no, that's not what I'm saying." But you're not able or willing to tell us who. And then Mr. Hayes tells you that one of those individuals wasn't even there. So it's hard to believe. So, in any other business, in any other environment, there would be serious repercussions. You said, sir, on ArriveCan that you are, quote, you said, "I'm accountable for failures," end quote. These are massive failures, the likes of which have not been seen in decades in this country. Have you offered to resign?
No, I've not offered to resign because I'm actually very proud of what we've achieved over the last 6 years.
That's shameful. There's nothing to be proud of in this. And I would, if I had time, I'd dig into the supposed cost savings. But the paper-based applications, those were human costs.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, Ms. Shanahan, point of order, please.
Again, the shameful treatment of our witnesses who are
She's using the same word I used.
Actually, it is the decorum in committee. It is Standing Order 117.
So she's calling it shameful,
and Chair,
but I said shameful?
I call upon you to ensure the respectful treatment of
she's using the same word, John.
witnesses that appear before us today. And
so, Ms. Shanahan, your point of order is that you're entitled to call a member shameful as actions, but the member cannot refer to the statements from a witness as shameful?
I am saying that the words that the member
You used the same word, Brenda.
With the witness, it's in questioning a witness, is not appropriate. It is inappropriate to this committee.
Your cover-up is inappropriate.
Ms. Shanahan,
a civil servant to call upon a civil servant to resign and then to say that is shameful. That is not worthy of this committee. We are here to ensure the accountability of civil servants, and we take that work very,
Ms. Shanahan, okay.
very
Ms. Shanahan, first, you know, it is my practice both to give members latitude to ask their questions and I think more unique for this committee to allow witnesses to respond fully, and I seldom cut them off because I think it is a benefit for this committee to hear answers. But Ms. Shanahan, one of the issues before this committee is the lack of answers that have come from the Government of Canada about who is responsible. I am tired of hearing that we will fix it next time, when this is about the auditor's report finding out what happened. You might not like the tone that Mr. Baird is using, but it is entirely appropriate. And I suspect a good part of the country agrees. Now, don't bring me into this debate with these frivolous points of order on tone, particularly when you take issue with the word Mr. Barrett used and then use it yourself to describe his actions, thereby reinforcing the point it is accurate. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor.
Chair?
Is it a point of order, Ms. Khalid?
Yes, Chair. Again, on the same point of order on decorum, I would appreciate if the Chair am talking about a different person now, if the chair himself could be a little bit more nonpartisan in how he conducts
Okay,
our
Ms. Khalid, don't bring me into your bun fights, and I will be nonpartisan and conduct the meeting. You're going to continue to disrupt opposition members from asking questions, then I will get involved and make a ruling, as is my job. I'm not just a potted plant up here that's going to watch the clock. But as you get more political and try to cut opposition members from asking legitimate committee questions, I will reinforce their rights as members to ask it. Mr. Bear, you have the floor for 3 minutes, 40 seconds, please.
My colleague Eric Duncan asked you last week, Mr. Moore, which CBSA executives involved in ArriveCan received performance bonuses, and you said, quote, I can't confirm if they received bonuses this year because the year is not actually at an end, end quote. Well, year end has come and gone. Which executives and how much?
I'm not able to answer that question because I'm not responsible for executives' performance bonuses.
Well, that wasn't your answer last week, sir. You said that you weren't able to provide the answer because the year end hadn't come, not that you weren't responsible for it. So let me ask you a question with precision that you will be able to answer. Did you, sir, receive bonuses for your work?
I think, as I said last week, I did receive some performance pay during the periods when while I've been the CFO. But also, I want to come back to your previous question, actually, with respect.
So $60 million $60 million in waste, along with allegations of fraud, forgery, and corruption. And this Arrive scam sees executives like yourself taking bonuses. You said, and I quote, I'm accountable for failures, end quote. You said that today. Where is the accountability? So everyone keeps their job, everyone gets a bonus, and Canadians are on the hook for all of it, for tens of millions of dollars. And the supposed cost savings of paper versus this application, well, those paper costs were human costs. All of those humans are still being paid. These were costs on top of it. And so much of it, tens of millions of dollars of it, are grift, are just liberal insiders getting rich while Canadians get hammered and have to pick up the bill. And so it's egregious. It's egregious is what it is. I have a question for the Deputy Auditor General. In your report on page 5, there's a table. It's Exhibit 1.1, estimated costs of the main contractors on the ArriveCan application at 31 March 2023. Of course, this details the $19.1 million that GC Strategies received that, of course, they deny getting paid. And of course, CBSA has no concept on how any of the contracts awarded to these two grifters were awarded. But at the bottom of that table, there's a line, other, and it's $6.1 million. Obviously, the big numbers draw a lot of attention, that $19 million. But this $6.1 million, so Canadians are now wondering how much of this corruption exists in the system and what makes up these companies. Are there numbered companies involved? Because we need to understand who it is that's getting rich off of this project that, of course, border service officers said was absolutely ineffective and prevented them from fulfilling their responsibilities. And we've heard that from their union representatives and directly from BSOs themselves. So that's $6.1 million. Who makes up that list?
So we didn't include the details in our report. All of those companies, contractors, received less than $1 million. That was the cutoff that we used for the table. As we said in the footnotes to the table, there were 21 contractors. We haven't notified those contractors of the fact that we would name them in the report. We didn't name them, but there were 21. So we're talking from the low dollar values up to at the high end, possibly $1 million.
Are you able to furnish the committee with a list of those contractors?
We do have a list of those names, and we can provide it to the committee.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate the work of the Auditor General's office.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. That is your time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Moore, in your time as in your position, is this the first time your department used this emergency planning procedure?
It uses it on a sadly on 2 regular basis. So, for example, I'm think a few months ago where there was the tragic accident in the United States around Rainbow Bridge. You know, the Southern Ontario region had to bring in their emergency planning for that, especially during the period when it could have been considered to be a terrorist attack. So any operational activity at the border, we will bring in our emergency management procedures.
Okay, so this is not the first time that this has happened. It seems unique then that there would be a general COVID fund. Was that unique?
So it was unique, but it was also a product of what we were having to do. So, for example, we had to increase the cleaning of our ports of entry and to do it twice a day rather than once a day. We had to secure, with the help of a public health agency and PSPC, all of the PPE. We had to buy sanitization cabinets to allow the officers to actually steam, clean their tools and things like that. So lots of different things.
It was a very broad fund.
It was a very broad fund covering a number of different activities.
Okay, so you would say like a COVID slush fund.
It was definitely not a COVID slush fund. It was an emergency management fund. And in the first year, we provided $5 million to the Information Science and Technology branch to partially cover their costs of the first year of the ArriveCan app.
From soup to nuts, you could put that in that fund, or it was basically an expense account.
Well, it was an emergency management committee decision. So all decisions went to the emergency management committee who decided what they were going to be funding with that money.
Okay. What kind of oversight did the minister have of that particular fund?
So the minister had no oversight on that because we were taking this money from our operational funding. So when the minister has oversight when the mains estimates are agreed or when supplementary estimates are agreed, but that would be the only time the minister would have oversight.
Would he have known about this COVID slush fund?
He certainly would not. He probably would not have known about the emergency management fund, but I can't comment on whether the president at that time referred to it.
So from protective gloves, masks, cleaning equipment to IT sourcing, that would have all gone through the same funding?
Yes, and in the first year it was about $20 million in total.
And so you can see how the Auditor General would have had a challenge in dissecting this particular slush fund.
Well, I think I do, and I said at the start, you know, we did not have a separate code for all the different activities. It did all go into this fund, and we learned that lesson. That was a mistake. We should have set up separate codes at the start, but I'm afraid that is part of a problem of being able to identify exactly where the funding went to.
Hence, the conclusion that this was a slush fund rather than an emergency management fund. Mr. Chair, I think that's my time. Thank you very much.
That is, Mr. Bierson. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Moore, could you confirm for us how many employees of CBSA are currently actively engaged in outside employment or contracting?
Cannot confirm that number, but I can ask the CBSA to come back to you with a number because that would be the Human Resources branch.
So you're telling me you came to this committee meeting unprepared to answer that question, given the fact that this has been a topic of discussion for some weeks?
My understanding is that there has been a question raised and they would be giving a response. And they are now doing a check of everybody to make sure that they have the full disclosure before they come up with a definitive number.
Are you personally aware of any employees within CBSA who have outside employment or outside contracts?
So I personally was involved in the conflicts of interest discussion last year for one of my employees who was proposing to take on an unpaid role. And actually we perceived that to be a conflict of interest, and it went through the standard process. So the evidence was gathered by our Human Resources branch. We discussed the process with the individual concerned, and actually the decision was that they decided to withdraw from that because there was at least a perceived conflict of interest. So I am aware of the process which is being operated, but it's operated by our Human Resources branch.
On the other side, are you aware of any contracts currently at CBSA which involve employees from other government departments?
So we, as a result of the investigations which are ongoing, we have done some searches of GEDs. We have identified some individuals who who are in GEDS, which would, if you're in GEDS, it implies you're an employee of another government department. And we have therefore contacted those departments and worked for each of those individuals. I think it was around about 6 or 7 individuals, and the Director General responsible for that has confirmed with the other government department that there was no conflict in those cases. However, that work is ongoing.
So I just want to stop you for a second. You say there was no conflict, but they are in fact government employees who have contracts with CBSA. Is that correct? Can you confirm that there are government employees, public servants, at other departments who currently have active contracts with the Canada Border Services Agency? Are you confirming that, yes or no?
So I cannot confirm that, but we can get back to you with the details of that individual.
Sir, I'm going to stop you right there. You said that they were checked in GEDS. They confirmed with the departments and the Director General that they were in fact employees of those departments. You said 6 or 7 of them, but now you're unwilling to confirm that?
No, what I'm saying is 6 or 7 were checked, but I do know for a fact that some of those were inappropriately on GEDS. They had actually resigned and moved elsewhere.
So of those 6 or 7, how many of them are Government of Canada employees with contracts at CBSA?
So I do not have that details, but I can.
Sir, you just said there were 6 or 7. It's a small number, and you tell me you can't confirm one way or the other?
I can't confirm because it wasn't in my area, but we can come.
Sir, you are the Chief Financial Officer of the CBSA. You came here knowing that this would be a topic of discussion. You're unable to tell us this information, yet you seem to have this information of the process that happened. You seem to have the information that these checks were done, but you can't tell us what actually happened?
I'm willing to come back to you on the level of details for these individuals.
Okay, sir, obviously there's been a process undertaken. This information is obviously at hand. Can you confirm and provide that information to this committee by the close of business today?
I'll have to go back to the department to see if I have it.
Could you make the endeavour that you'll try to do that by
I will
close of
endeavour
business
to
today?
go back to the department and talk to the DG who was responsible for this.
Your non-answers are frankly surprising. But
Let me just interject, Mr. Nader. I appreciate the information will be forthcoming as soon as possible. Mr. Nader, the committee does allow for some time. I appreciate your determination to get to the bottom of this, but Mr. Moore, if you're able to, that's wonderful. But as soon as possible, and we will reach out at some point. Mr. Nader, back to you for a minute.
Because there may also be some privacy impact, which I can't comment on.
Again, privacy is not an issue. As you well know, sir, this Parliament and this committee can compel information from witnesses at any degree, and privacy and any of those issues are not impediments to providing information. This committee, and you as a senior public servant, ought to know the powers of committees to call for information and documents. On a different matter, 3 information technology contractors were found to have fraudulently billed for contract work with several departments between 2018 and 2022. These payments were estimated to be nearly $5 million. You were asked this question by my colleague, Mr. Brock, in a previous committee. Can you now confirm whether any of those firms did work with the Canada Border Services Agency?
So as I said at the previous committee appearance, the Public Services and Procurement Canada informed us that the CBSA was involved, and the involvement were estimated up to $15,000. They have not come back and given us the details yet.
When do you expect that information to be forthcoming?
I'll have to go back to PSPC and ask them.
So the exact same answer you basically gave a week and a half ago.
Well, I think we have had the Easter period in between.
Yes, we did have two days there that were
10 seconds,
statutory holidays. Chair, I will just conclude by saying I look forward to that information on double dipping coming to this committee as expeditiously as possible, because it is a concern for many Canadians.
Mr. Nader.